Well, welcome everybody. And for those just joining us, this is our August Learn and Lead session, Money 101, a financial panel. We are so very excited to have you joining us. This has been one of our most requested topics, so we're excited to present it today. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And for those of us joining through recording, great to see you. Great to have you with us. We are very excited for today. I will go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit about our time together as well as our agenda. And my name is Tivoli. I am the Associate Director of Development with Vanguard in our Alumni Relations and Advancement team. We've got Heather, our co-host today, our Director of Alumni Relations. We'll also be introducing our panel in just a little bit, but thank you for joining our Learn and Lead. These are our monthly gatherings for alumni, friends of the university, all community members, where we get to provide some amazing lifelong learning to our Vanguard community. And obviously today we are talking Money 101 with some of our financial expert alumni. Today, I will be welcoming you all and providing some Vanguard updates. Heather will be leading us in prayer, and then we'll go right into our panel discussion. We suggest for your viewing ease using the speaker view option if you'd like, or if you like the gallery, which I do too, you can see everyone's smiling faces. We'll also be having a Q&A session as we move forward. So at any point during our time together, if you've got questions for our panel, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we will get to them towards the end of our time together. And then of course, we'll have a conclusion with some very fun announcements of how you can get involved with Vanguard, your alma mater, or your favorite community university. So we've got a couple really fun Vanguard updates for you. We are so excited that our students are coming back to campus this fall. We are already getting to see some of our sports teams move in and be practicing in the pit. So we have our in-person fall move-in start next week for our incoming freshmen and transfer students. We have, again, some strong enrollment and re-enrollment rates. God is continuing to bless Vanguard with all of these students coming to us. We're very excited for all the faculty and staff returning once again. And we've got some great news. The monument sign construction for that landmark campaign that so many of you were a part of will begin in mid-September. So definitely look out for the change on Newport Boulevard that is coming very soon. Again, as we've said it before, Vanguard will no longer be the best kept secret in Orange County. We are here. We are very proud to be Lions together. Of course, our Learn and Leads are presented with our Alumni Council. We've got 3 priorities in our Alumni Council: the Alumni Awards, which nominations will be opening up in the coming months. Please look out for that. Our alumni giving percentage, which we were able to double in the past year, very proud of that. And alumni engagement, which presents virtual and in-person events like these so that you can get together with your fellow alumni and friends of the university. Special news coming up on November 10th, we've got our 2nd annual Vanguard Giving Day. Can't wait to support. Last year, we raised over $330,000 in 24 hours for Vanguard, mostly because of all of your support. So thank you again, and definitely stay in the loop for all of the amazing ways to get involved this year. And we've got some special events coming, new events, old events, all the good stuff. So you can definitely fill up your calendars with so much Vanguard fun. Well, I will toss it over to Heather, who will open our time in prayer, and then we will introduce our panel.
Yeah. Let's pray together. Lord, I'm so grateful that you are with us today. You promise that you will give us new mercies every day. We're grateful for that today, Lord. I pray that you will be with us as we talk about money. And I pray, Lord, that you will help us open our minds and ears to what you'd have us hear. And I pray that we would be wonderfully responsible with what you've given us, Lord. I pray that you would bless my friends on this call, Lord. I pray that you would be with Nick and Rob. Would you lead and guide them today? I pray for the rest of the folks on this call, Lord. I pray that you would meet the needs that you see in each of our lives today as only you can, Lord. We're so grateful for Vanguard, Lord. I pray that you would bless Vanguard as well. I pray that you would bless these new incoming freshmen that are coming in next week, Lord. Would you give them peace in their minds and their hearts, be with their families. And Lord, I thank you for our alums of Vanguard. I pray that you would, again, bless our great university. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Heather. Well, it is now my joy to share with you our panel. Today, we've got some amazing alum joining us. Let me get to the right slide so I can properly introduce these amazing financial experts. And of course, my computer is just so excited to be a part of it. Well, let me introduce, you can see them here with us. We've got Nick Peterson, who is a financial advisor with Edward Jones, a financial firm dedicated to serving the needs of individual investors. He's a resident of Costa Mesa and has 2 children with his wife and fellow Vanguard alum, Brittany. Welcome, Nick. So excited to have you here with us. We also have Rob Knutson, who is an investment advisor and managing partner at J. Derrick Lewis and Associates in Newport Beach. He also serves as the chief executive officer there. Rob is the husband to his high school and Vanguard sweetheart, Holly, and the father to 4 amazing children. Thank you so much for both being with us today and sharing your amazing insights. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Of course. Well, it is our pleasure to obviously jump right into talking all about money today. And as I said, and as we know, you guys have had so much experience with this, but as we get started, would you please share a little bit about your background in finance and kind of what brought you to this career? Nick, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So thanks again for having us. It's always a pleasure to get back to Vanguard and the community that we were a part of, seems like many years ago. So I graduated in 2010, a semester early, as we were talking earlier, so technically 2009, and studied business. My wife and I took a lot of the classes, and some of the teachers that are still there, had an opportunity to play baseball there as well. I'm a second generation advisor with Edward Jones. So my dad actually opened up the first Edward Jones office here in Costa Mesa, off Mesa Verde Drive. Growing up with him in that industry, as a kid, you don't really know much about it. He's been through so much, in his career. And his sound advice to me when I graduated was really just a good experience. So out of college, I went into sales, very raw business to business, learned how to deal with rejection and adversity and understand what working on performance is like. And that was a 5-year stint in my career out of college, which, took me up to the Bay Area and to open up my own company for a few years and, away from family, although my dad grew up in Sunnyvale. After a few years of that, my dad, as he saw my success, started the recruiting calls to me to bring me on board. So it took a few years and getting pregnant and realizing we'd rather be closer to home in Costa Mesa, which brought us back down in 2015. And that's when I started my career and had the opportunity to work with my father for a couple of years and learn from him and all of his experiences. And, we've had our own branch now for about 4 years right near South Coast Plaza. So it's been a blessing, living in the community where we serve and help our clients where we work. And obviously being close to Vanguard has been a pleasure too. So.
Well, we are so excited to have you here with us and glad you're back in Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
Rob, how about yourself?
Yes, I was born and raised in Huntington Beach, and Vanguard. I actually followed my brother to Vanguard, and he was a couple years ahead of me. And I wanted to stay close. And part of that was the draw to my now wife, who I was dating at the time. And she was finishing up high school and I was starting Vanguard. So that had a strong pull to keep me close by. And we got married right after my graduation, shortly before she graduated. And yeah, we've stayed close ever since. We've lived in Costa Mesa and now we're back in Huntington Beach. And my office is over by John Wayne Airport. And I actually was an intern at the company that I'm at now while I was a student at Vanguard. And so I took morning classes, had Fridays off. And so I spent 15 hours a week while I was attending school, kind of getting to kick the tires over here and see what this industry was all about. And what really drew me in, beyond the financial part of it, I think is a fraction of what we do. And I'm sure Nick would agree, but it's a people business, and we're in the business of serving and helping people with kind of real world problems or real world, ideas or dreams and solutions. So it's heavily a people business. We spend a lot of time either walking people through tough situations or helping them through very exciting situations and everything in between. So it's, I'd say my favorite part of the job is either grabbing hold of a young person and putting them on the right path, or taking somebody who's accumulated quite a bit and helping them be extremely generous with what God's given them over their lifetime and their career. So yeah, very fulfilling. A lot of areas, or a lot of ways that we get to serve and help people. And like Nick said, it's just a joy to be in the community that I grew up in, and still participate in that community and give back to that community. So yeah, happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, and actually you've provided a wonderful segue into one of our first questions, Rob, if you want to kick us off here. As Christians in the financial sphere, how does your faith affect your view of finances and kind of the stewardship of one's personal or business finances?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as Christians, a fundamental truth or belief that we have is that God owns it all. And there's plenty of scripture that can really highlight and point to that. But the earth is the Lord's and everything that he created is his. And so when we look at all of our stuff or the things that we hold on to or that we think are important or that we think are ours, it's refreshing and it's helpful to take a step back and really look at it through a stewardship lens, that everything that we have is God's and he's given it to us to use for whatever reason. So whether it's our children or our stuff or our homes or our finances or whatever, God owns it all and we're just simply his stewards. And so that's, the incredible part of our business is that it's very much so a ministry, and we get to help people realize that everything they have is God's, and help them, to utilize it and really think about, where their money's going and where their time is going and everything else. So it's, I think that's a fundamental place to start, is recognizing where it came from and whose it really is.
Absolutely. What about yourself, Nick? How does your faith kind of affect you in your business?
Yeah, no, I would agree with a lot of what Rob said, and I think it's definitely not easy, especially in the world that we're in today. It's so easy to get caught up in the rat race of life, and a lot of what our decision making is driven by our peers and the media, and a lot of that isn't available, right? I mean, we don't see a lot of faith-driven ideas in the mainstream. And a lot of what we do, especially from the planning perspective, really starts at the beginning and having this discovery discussion with our clients to know, what matters and what we can or cannot control, and living somewhere in the middle, because, anything we do, like Rob said, it's a people business, and it's not a cookie cutter program that, not everybody fits in the same planning discussion. And it always starts at, what matters to you, right? Is it faith, family, your money, are you want to give back and, be good stewards of that. And then also realizing that there's a lot of things in life we can't control, and, giving that up to God is so important. And it really, I think it provides some peace of mind and clarity of where they're headed. And obviously, being a part of that and that journey is key. But, it's definitely not easy, but it is a big piece of it. And, I think messaging that at the beginning is important, because, it's hard to provide any advice or guidance unless we know really what the purpose is of any of this, right?
Absolutely. Having that kind of foundational knowledge of one's goals and all that. And so in that, kind of as we jump into some of the larger topics that we've, got kind of some major requests about. What is your advice on debt? There's so many different schools of thought. I think we've all kind of heard so many different ways to go about it, but what would be your advice? And Nick, we'll start with you, to navigate debt well, or, and obviously there's so many different kinds, from student loans, cars, home payments, beyond. What I guess is your kind of entry level advice to people who are in that stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it just comes down to having that awareness of, what debt you have. It's always interesting when we have the conversation with a family, clients, and we talk about where they're at and where they're trying to go. I mean, one of the areas that I'm sure we could all agree with that we probably don't have a good handle on is how much we spend. If someone was to ask you that, you probably would undercut it maybe 30% in real time of what you actually spend, on a weekly or monthly basis. But it's so important when it comes to your long-term planning, because really the means to the end is looking at making sure that what you accumulate can last, right? And want to know what is enough for you and your family to have that work optional retirement and have that peace of mind. So I think it just comes down to being aware of what it is and being honest with your spouse or significant other of, what overall debt you have, and just putting together a plan and being on the same page to attack it. It's definitely hard to be patient, but it took time to accumulate it, so it's probably going to take time to get rid of it, right? So there's not a quick fix, and a lot of it's just fundamentally changing your habits, and that's more of a conversation just to be honest with yourself about.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I would tag team it with, starting with the question, how much is enough, right? So we always get people who want to start with the end in mind rather than starting at the beginning, right? So a lot of clients or potential clients, they want to know, well, how much is enough, or what do I need to do today to make sure I'm good? Well, good for you might be very different to good for Nick or good to Tivoli or whatever, right? So there's no clear-cut answer to how much is enough, how much debt is enough or not enough or bad or good. But I would say that the borrower is the slave to the lender, right? So when we're talking about debt has the ability to control our decisions. And so I would say there's definitely some good debts that you can have. I think sensible student loans are not a bad thing. I think a sensible mortgage is not a bad thing. But ultimately, your debt can control decisions, your future decisions that you make. So an example would be if you walk out of college with $200,000 in student loan debt, and you decide that medical sales career that you were dreaming of that's going to earn you enough to pay down that debt very quickly, all of a sudden is not exciting, and you've changed your mind and you want to be a missionary. Well, it's going to be very difficult for you to go out on the mission field and to have, a church or a network behind you to support not only what you're doing on the mission field, but also that, $3-4 grand a month that you have to pay to service your student loan debt or whatever it is. So I think debt can be a fine tool, and an appropriate tool in some cases, but sensible debt. And when we get too aggressive on the debt side, all of a sudden it starts limiting our options, and you can't serve God and money, or you can't serve God and the lender. And so it can make things challenging.
That's really, really good advice. Well, and in that too, I think, because, there's so much. And when it comes to thinking of debt, as we've said, do you have any advice? We've got so many alums that I think for those who have signed up, especially for this session, that might be more in the space of kind of entering into the home buying sphere. Do you have any advice for kind of navigating that well, or if there's kind of any steps that someone should take ahead of time as they begin to think about that huge life goal to kind of own their own home?
Want me to go first?
Please.
Yeah. So any major purchase like that, whether, home or fill in the blank, it has to come with a real sense of what that actually entails and what that means, right? So if you were to go, and some lender out there tells you that you can borrow $1 million to purchase this home with, 3% down or 5% down or 20% down or whatever, it's having a real realization of what that actually means in terms of repayment and what is actual home ownership cost, right? It's not just the mortgage, it's the tax liability, it's the ongoing insurance, it's the maintenance, right? So having a real sense of what something costs, I think, is the first place to start. I mean, whether you're purchasing a car or student loans or a home, I think they all fall in the same category. It's taking a real hard look at what that actually entails and what it means. And I would say, surround yourself with a multitude of counsel. You don't go to a car dealership to learn about car loans, right? They're obviously going to give you half the story, or they're going to start with the payment, right? What you can afford. Can you afford this payment? But what you're ultimately concerned about is what's the price of the car, or what's the price of the home, right? So if just because you can afford a payment today might not mean it's a good decision. And so it really takes, a deep look at, the bigger picture and, starting with the end in mind, maybe, right? How is a 30-year mortgage going to affect my life? And so I'll let Nick jump in from there.
Yeah, no, Rob, but you're spot on. Back to what you were talking about with sensible debt, I think that comes into play too, where we get a lot of, families that come to us and say, I just want to pay off my house, which I think is noble, right? We want to be debt free, and that helps with your overall cash flow in retirement and not having as much spending. But you also have to realize, that's going to be your largest asset, right? And the challenge is, of course, how do you turn that into income, right? When you no longer have a paycheck every couple of weeks. And the great thing is that the value of your home isn't worth any less if you owe $300,000 versus $400,000. The value is still going to go up, and you're better off maybe having more of that liquidity to do other things like serve your community and be able to enjoy retirement versus having most of your money in a house. So I think it's important, right? Because you don't want to be continuing to pay rent or putting something money into something that you're not going to get back down the road. But you also have to be smart with understanding the long term of what this house means to you and your family. How much are you going to be putting in? There is the maintenance, right? It's not just you buy this house and that's it. I mean, things break every day, it seems like, all at once. So understanding what that looks like, and can you afford the margins there? So but yeah, like Rob said, having guidance and mentors to help you through this, people that have done that before, would be a good starting point to just ask for advice. Because people selling you a loan or selling your house, they have one goal in mind, and that's to sell you something. So they're probably not the best person to get advice from on that.
That's good.
I would tag on to that and say, if anybody knows anybody in real estate or car sales or anything, right? It's always a good time to buy a house, and it's always a good decision to own property, and it's always a good time to buy a new car, used car, fill in the blank, right? So you got to step back and, look at what their motivation might be. And regardless of a relationship or how good of a friend they are, and, if it sounds too good to be true in any investment, it probably is. And I would say that with probably 95% of the time, it's too good to be true, right? And if you're seeing handwritten signs about flipping homes on every corner or buy gold on every corner, that means that somebody's probably making some money, and it's unlikely that it's the end user that's the one that's making some money. So there's always going to be that story of somebody who made it big or doubled their money overnight because they took a big risk or they were in the right place at the right time. But it's foolish to think that that's going to work for everybody. And so definitely get second opinions, extra counsel, and talk to a variety of people. Don't just talk to one person.
Such good advice and such sound of voice on so many different points too, of huge purchases, from cars to homes to you name it. Well, and in that too, you guys have both touched on the long-term finance investments. So what would be your advice for someone kind of starting to get into the investment sphere? I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. We obviously every day hear about the Reddit stocks or the cryptocurrency or things that are going on in the stock market. Do you think that that is a good way for someone to kind of start to build their wealth? And what would be your kind of advice for that long-term versus short-term route to go? Rob, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So we've heavily focused on long-term investment planning, and the short term I think is necessary for certain things, but our primary focus is not on doubling your money overnight or getting rich quick. You can read study after study about people who've won the lottery or inherited a bunch of money, and it's literally gone in a matter of months. We had a client actually who passed, a significant asset onto their son, and it was, we're talking $300,000-$400,000, and it was literally gone in a matter of 18 months, right? And whether, it doesn't matter what or why, it's just a matter of easy come, easy go oftentimes. And so when we think long term, it doesn't matter how much money you make, or it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's really about what you do with what you make and what you do with what you have. And so I have a client who's recently retired, and he worked in ministry his entire life, and he never made six figures. He basically made enough to get by his entire career, but somebody got a hold of him early on and encouraged him to put a little bit away each month. And they bought a home, 30 plus years ago. They saved a little bit, they spent a little bit less than they made each month and saved a little bit. And they're now sitting in a position, retired, with more income than they've ever had. And they can't even fathom that they have excess. And it was just a matter of, steady plotting and putting a little bit away for a long period of time. And that's the real way to build sustainable wealth is through that path.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we get a lot of questions, especially this last year and a half, on just how polarizing the stock market has been, and how much, you could say, money is out there to be made. And we always get asked, like, the stock market's like gambling. But I always like to push it back on them, is that when you go to the casino, the odds are forever going to be with the house, right? The longer you're there, the odds continue to go in the house's favor. Where the opposite works for the stock market or any sound investment strategy is that the longer you invest, you continue to get, it goes in your favor, right? If you look at any 10-year, 20-year period, if you just were in a diversified investment portfolio, no matter what 10-year period you look at, you're never going to be negative. That's just what's happened in history. And you just have to have that, long-term focus, not that instant gratification. Just doing it monthly. I know a lot of us on this call probably have access to a 401k plan or IRA. And, the great thing about that, it's completely out of sight, out of mind. It's pre-tax. You're not going to miss it. And you do that every month for your career, you're going to be pretty surprised by how much you can accumulate over that time by just, keeping it there. And, that's your retirement. There's a lot of other goals you may have for other pieces of your plan where that might be more short term, but anything that has to do with retirement when you turn 60 years old, which seems like forever from now, for some of us, you just have to be patient. That's the important thing.
Yeah, and I'll tag on and just say that a good analogy is investments are like a bar of soap. The more you handle it, the smaller it gets. And so when we see people having success, I'm sure everybody knows somebody with a Robinhood account that, they doubled their money in a matter of weeks, probably in March or April of 2020. And that sounds appealing, right? I take this check and I'm just going to start with 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever and see what happens. And you get a little taste of success, right? And back then you could have picked anything and it would have gone up, in a short order of time. And you get a sense of that. And then it just becomes, well, I'll just do a little bit more. I'll just do a little bit more. And the next thing you know, you've lost it all. Or, we see it happen all the time where, especially in real estate, where it's a place where you can really leverage your way to more and you can leverage your way to bankruptcy, right? So it's one of those things where there's high reward, there's high risk, and really understanding what that risk looks like and, having a real, sense about what that actually, entails. And I always tell people that are interested in the latest, meme stock or Reddit stock or whatever, that's something you do with money you're willing to lose. As far as, if you want to call it an investment, I had to have a hard time calling it an investment. But, high risk, high reward. And, that's not a way to build long-term wealth, because, you got to be right quite often in order for that to work out in the long run.
Well, this is providing a wonderful segue once again. And I want to remind all of our friends who are in this session with us, if you have questions for our panelists, please definitely put them in the chat for our Q&A portion. But let's talk about savings and building wealth. And you gave some great advice already of just kind of like the small as you go. But what are some other great ways for people to build their savings or jumpstart it? Or what would be things that you would tell your clients? Nick, do you want to start us off?
Sure. It always starts at the beginning, of any conversation of, what matters, right? What is the purpose of the money? And deciphering, how you want to go about saving. We get a lot of questions about emergency cash and how much savings we should have. And I think a lot of the advice and guidance is kind of a one size fits all. It doesn't really apply to everyone. I'm sure not many people on this call have 12 months of income saved in a bank account at any moment's notice. Difficult to do, but it's still important to have cash available that is going to allow you to pay for things without taking on debt to pay for it. So I think that's a good starting point, is just to have that conversation with professional or your spouse to figure out what amount would you feel comfortable with if something were to happen, right? I mean, we all saw this last year, right? When the economy shuts down and you don't have income that you were used to, how does it impact your family? When you buy a house, things break, do you have the money available to pay for that? So that's an important piece to have that available. But I wouldn't say that, everybody needs the same amount, because sure, you probably have looked at your bank account statement and seen all the return that you earn on that cash from the bank. And you're just so joyous about it. I'm obviously kidding. With the pennies we earn. So we also need to understand, where's a better place to put some of this hard-earned money that we work so hard to make. That's a piece of it too. But on the other end is looking at, what's available to you. Do you have a 401k through work? Do they offer a matching program, which is pretty common in the current space, where, that's free money that you're getting, right? If you're putting in 5%, 6% of your paycheck, and your company matches 4%, I mean, you're almost doubling your money without even having to invest, right? So that's a great way to accumulate and grow wealth, is just to take advantage of all the available options that you have through your employer. And then if you don't, well, looking at things like IRAs and, some of the other accounts that are available online to at least start to put money away, and just do that on a monthly basis with an amount you're comfortable with that doesn't, infringe on your monthly budget too much. But that's a great starting point. And then I think, like any goal you set, is to reevaluate it every few months. It's easy for us to kind of get stuck with, I've done $50 a month for 2 years, but you haven't missed it, and you probably could have put in $200 a month as your income grows. So it's also important to evaluate how much you're saving, and setting a goal to increase that as your income grows and as you get more comfortable with that habit is another thing to consider.
And I would say, really just trying to picture what it is that goal is, right? So if you're looking to have, if you want to buy a car, and you can go down to any car dealership and finance a car, most people could finance a car, whether you get a good rate or not, but you could probably walk out and buy a $50,000 car, get a nice hefty payment that you're going to be paying for a while, and pay it down over the next 3 to 8 years or whatever, right? But imagine saving $50,000, right? How long would it take you to accumulate $50,000 of savings, right? It probably takes some time. And then when now picture that $50,000 in your hand and handing that over for that same car, right? If anybody's bought a new car in the last 3 years, when does that new car feel kind of wear off, right? It's super exciting. For me, I would say it's a matter of months. I mean, I got a new car this year, and it was being pulled into the garage, and it was clean, and the kids weren't allowed to touch it. And about 2 months in, like, all of that stuff goes out the window, and it just becomes a car again, right? It gets me to and from work, and it sits parked a lot of the time. So when you look at, trying to envision what's really important, right? Is that car looking nice or driving a certain way really important? And that's fine if it is. If that's the case, are you willing to make that trade-off, right? So I'm not saying that financing a car is a bad idea, but try and picture taking the full purchase price of that car and handing that over for the vehicle, right? Would that feel good? Or would that be like, I worked hard for this 50 grand and I do not want to trade it for a Suburban that my kids are going to destroy, right? Or something like that. So try and envision what it is. And then like Nick said, savings, whether you're putting a little bit away for a long period of time, or you've got an aggressive goal that you want to save for, take inventory on what you're spending. Nick nailed it earlier. I would say people always underestimate how much they actually spend, or they're ashamed of how much they spend, or they just don't talk about it because they don't want to know. Have a real honest conversation with yourself or with your spouse and really look at what you're spending. I think people who successfully spend less than they make and save quite a bit of money, the way they do that is they evaluate their spending. They set a budget. I would encourage, even a family finance meeting, and start getting your kids involved in it, right? You might not have to show them all the numbers, your income, or what you're comfortable with, but your kids should know that you spend X number of dollars to keep the lights on in the house, and you spend this much money to drive your car, and they'll start to appreciate it. My boys, my oldest is almost 10 and the next one is 7. And, they wanted money for whatever toy or whatever game or, something, and $20, $30. And then we go to the grocery store and we get a half a basket of stuff that they don't even really like. And it was $200. And now they're like, whoa, like that cost $200, right? So they're starting to realize what things cost. I would say have them participate as much as possible, because then they're going to start having appreciation, for that cost. But take inventory, see where you can cut. I think there's a lot of times that, we have auto subscriptions. It's like you pay for Netflix, but there's nothing good on Netflix to watch anyway. It's like, cut it, get rid of it. Or people like, oh, it's only $14 a month. Okay, we'll multiply that times 12, right? And then you just keep adding these things up that we pay for, we don't realize. And the latest and greatest in retail, right, is subscription-based everything, right? Because if they sell you something that's $14 a month, it doesn't feel that bad, versus having to pay out of pocket $160 all up, at once for a year subscription or something. So this subscription model, or this monthly payment, payment plan world that we live in. I just had a guy that I work out with that, he's like, oh, I just stocked up on these shorts. And I'm like, oh, it's great. I can get you a discount next time. Let me know. He's like, oh no, I got the best discount out there. I paid with Afterpay. He goes, this is $20 a month. I'm like, that's not a discount, right? All you did is you created a payment plan that you're probably paying interest on. You probably paid more than, had you, just paid full price or whatever. So there's this misconception oftentimes, and, the marketing gurus out there trying to find ways to make you feel that you need something that someone else has. They're trying to make you feel that you deserve something just because someone else has it. And they're trying to sell you something that you may or may not really need. And so when you have those feelings, right, you do that cost benefit analysis. Do I really need this, or am I okay with this? And finding that contentment. So
that's so good. And you are, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but you're definitely preaching to the choir here. I recently got, I guess, my bank app updated. And so they showed me all the subscriptions that I was a part of. And some of them, I was like, I don't even remember subscribing to that. And so it was definitely a light bulb moment to definitely take in a stock of all the kinds of things that are more passive expenditures that I'm not quite so aware of. And I love the point of getting your kids involved in your kind of financial talks. Definitely kind of to the level that they can understand well. And I do want to mention to everyone who's on the call as well, Rob very graciously is giving everyone who's a part of our session today his book, Stewardship from the Start, which touches on these points as well. And so we're really excited about that too. And thank you so much for sharing that with everyone, Rob. And I'm sure that that also kind of leans into that as well, of having the entire family look at everything at every single point too, because our kids are going to go to college and they're going to have their payments, and hopefully we can help them with all of that stuff. But really great thoughts for us to keep in mind. But I'd love to ask, before we go into our question and answer portion, what would be your kind of passion point when it comes to finances? I know that, in the Christian sphere, we have, a bit of a different way of looking at things. And I'm sure your clients have huge things that they prioritize. And we do live in more of a consumer market world where the next greatest thing in fast fashion or fast cars is what we all feel like we need to have. But what would be your passion points, or kind of your favorite advice to give people when they think of their finances? Rob, would you mind kicking us off in that?
Sure. And like Tivoli said, I'm super passionate about stewardship and just the entire idea behind it, especially when it comes to kids. So we meet with a lot of young families, and at least one, if not both, parties are always interested in, retirement's important, but what do I do with these kids? Or how do I help my kids be better off than I was? Or, and statistically, only 14% of wealthy, and I use the term wealthy loosely because that covers probably the majority of people on this call, or I would say anybody living in California or Southern California that has access to a computer is probably considered wealthy by definition. But only about 14% of wealthy individuals are even willing to talk about their finances with their kids. So it's a very underserved, portion of our population where we're sending kids out off to college with no concept of, no real financial literacy, right? They've, mom and dad have kind of taken care of everything. They go off to school. And even in my experience, I went off to school and I had a job and I worked and I had some income, but I knew my parents were there to cover me. And so it was never, I didn't have to own it essentially. And I was able to walk out with very sensible student loans, but I had a start because my parents were willing to talk about it. And I had I would say I probably had a leg up on most people because they were, putting it out there in front of me and letting me know what the outcome is going to be. And, if I graduate a little bit early, Nick and I both graduated a semester early, and my dad presented it to me in the, form of numbers, right? If you graduate a little early, take a few summer school classes and you load up full semesters, you could save X number of dollars. And that made sense to me. So yeah, getting in front of the problem early, but I think stewardship for me is, in every aspect of our life. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or a little bit of money. I think God's interested in our heart and our time more than our money. And I think our money is a reflection of our heart, and our time also is a reflection of our heart. So when we look at, what are we doing, for somebody who might not have any excess to give, you can give your time, right? And everybody can find ways to cut something out of their life to give some time. And so just from a, kind of a passion point for me, if I can meet with young individuals and put them on the right path and help show them what, it could look like if they stuck to a plan and they got started early, and it would cost them far less to get to maybe the same end result that they're looking to get to had they start, 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier. That would, super exciting to me to put them on that path. And then also people in the latter half, right, where they're retired, they've accumulated quite a bit, and helping them, decide what to do with what they've accumulated, right? We can't take any of it with us, and we're all, every day is a gift. And so if tomorrow doesn't come, our bank account could be full, our emergency fund could be, 4 years, and, we feel like we're very comfortable. That could all be gone tomorrow, and you're not going to be able to take any of it with you. So yeah, that's what I'm passionate about.
Awesome, Rob. And I definitely want to read your book because I'm sure I could learn quite a bit and teaching my kids. So that's awesome. As I mentioned earlier in the call, I'm a second generation advisor. My dad has been with the same firm that he started with, almost 30 years ago. And my sister, who's a few years younger than me, is also with Edward Jones. And I think the idea of legacy has always kind of drawn me to this industry and helping families not only build that legacy, but then also to pass that on. We work with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs in our practice, and the biggest concern that we always hear is that, hey, I've taken so much risk and I've worked so hard to build this, and I want to make sure that it's either passed on or I can actually step away and have that work optional lifestyle. People that have built businesses, maybe on this call, it's your entire life that you've put towards that. And, eventually you want to be able to enjoy some of these passions that you have outside of work. And, we're pretty ingrained in our families' lives. We have clients that unfortunately we deal with the loss of a loved one and, having to deal with that as they now are in charge of everything. We deal with the exciting things of kids, paying for their last tuition bill, and they finally could start saving for themselves. And we also have clients that are finally able to retire, and it's exciting, but it's a lot on our plates to be able to walk them through that. But I think the idea of legacy is a big passion point, just because I've been able to hopefully live through that with my dad's legacy and following in his footsteps, and hopefully my kids. I think it would be awesome to be able to pass my practice and my clients on to my kids. How great is that? It's security for our clients, so that way when they start asking me when I'm in my 50s, when am I going to retire, I get to say, well, my kids will take care of you, because that's what my dad did. But I think that's a big focus for me, and I'm that on.
That is fantastic. And thank you both. I think, the wealth of knowledge that you both have and that you've imparted with us is so huge. And again, we are so grateful that you would share your time and your talent with each of us. Well, and let's open up to our question and answer portion. I know that we've gotten a couple questions already. And if you haven't had a chance yet and have a question for our fantastic panel, please definitely drop it in the chat. We will try and get to all of them, and if we run out of time, we'll take them and ask our panelists offline and send those answers out to you. And please remember that this is recorded, so we will send the recording out to each of you. So if you have someone that you want to share it with, please do so. These are for the entire Vanguard community, and we're so grateful that we get to put these on. This is our first question. Nick, how about you start us off? What investment strategy do you promote with clients? Do you encourage stocks over real estate?
It's a great question. And I think we touched on it a few times throughout the discussion, but it always starts down to what is the goal? Any investment is probably a good investment as long as you're diversified. Real estate is a big piece of that. Owning good quality companies is a piece of that, but you also need to understand just what your comfort is with risk, because any investment has risk, and you need to understand the expectations there. So our firm, it's a large firm, but we are very specialized in working with individuals and their planning needs. So it is full service in the aspect that we have many different investment options that allow us to make the proper recommendations for each individual client and their goals. So I guess that's a tough one to answer specifically, but most of those questions are answered typically in a one-on-one conversation with them, and understanding what have you invested so far, and what are you trying to accomplish with this money. So part of that question, maybe yes, but it depends.
Yeah, not much for me to add there, but I would just say it really just comes down to what's the desired outcome and what do you have, starting with taking inventory of what you have. A lot of people own a home and they want to invest in real estate, and all of a sudden their net worth is skewed, highly towards real estate, and maybe they're not as diversified as they thought or they want to be or they should be. And so it really is just an individual question. First take inventory of what you have, what's the idea, what's the goal, and then we can help, or somebody like us could help design a plan to get there. But there's lots of ways to get to a similar destination.
That's good. Thank you both. Well, and this is kind of a two-parter question because I see Leslie asked great questions here, and it is probably, again, dependent on personal finances in each. But first off, where would you suggest someone start to learn more about the stock market, and how much would you suggest a person start in their investments, financially speaking? Rob, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So as far as how much to start with or where to start, I say start with what you can. If you can afford $25 a month, start with 25. If you can afford 50, start with 50. So I don't think there's any, 25 is 25 times better than zero, right? So I would say there's not a dollar amount that's too little to get started. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. And then as far as, how much should you be doing? It really depends on what the end result goal is. And so we can back into that, right? If you have a target of you want to retire with $5 million, it's very, pretty simple math on how you get to that point. If you're young, it can be very easy. If you're 60 years old, it can be very difficult. But the earlier you start, the easier it'll be. And so I would say get started with whatever you can. And then where to go to learn about stocks and different things. First place I would start would be talk to somebody like Nick or myself and just get an understanding of what it is, right? Understanding how stocks function, just get a basic, understanding, and then they can point you to some resources. I say there's a lot of good advice that can be found on the internet, but there's also a lot of garbage. And so just having somebody who can help you sift through the first layer and kind of get started in a good direction. And then talk to multiple people, right? You're going to get a different opinion from, Nick and I will probably rhyme and have a lot of the same things to say. But he might have a little bit different of a take what somebody like he says and what somebody like I say, and then do your own homework from there and find out what makes sense for you. But in our industry or just in finance in general, there's not a one size fits all. You look at every major corporation out there, all of them are doing things very differently on the financial side of their business, right? There's not a lot of similarities. The big overarching kind of themes are very similar, but there's a lot of different intricacies that are involved. And so you got to come up with your own plan to get to your own destination.
Yeah, well said. I think, I don't have much to add on how much to invest, but, I think from the education perspective, a lot of the common themes you'll probably find is being diversified is important, right? Owning a lot of good quality investments, because even though Rob and I are in the industry, we don't know everything about every company, and we have a lot of research that we look at and really smart people that support us, but it's not your job to be a stock picker, right? You have other passions and things on it that you want to accomplish. So a lot of times it's good to just own, investments that provide you a lot of diversification and owning good quality companies that you feel strongly about, because that's likely going to be a good outcome, depending on what the goal is. But, I would try to, not research everything, and because like Rob said, there's a lot of information out there, and some of it's very similar, some of it doesn't really apply to you individually, and it's kind of that analysis by paralysis, right? Where you just don't do anything, right? You research all this time and nothing happens. So I would say, find an amount that you feel comfortable with, get started, and then a lot of times that education happens as you are doing it versus learning everything first before you make a decision.
That's really good. Well, and gosh, this is just so much great information. And I know that our time is wrapping up quickly. But here's a last question that we got. What would you say is an average percent fee that an advisor would charge for a $50,000 investment? Like what could someone expect when they're coming to a financial advisor for, because we do know that it's an investment to work with someone who has such great knowledge, but for someone just getting started, like how does one kind of get into that or get into working with someone of your caliber? For either of you to jump in.
Rob, you want to answer that?
Sure. So I would say the industry average is about 1%, and you can find it for less and you can find it for significantly more. But what I would drill down in the questions I would ask is what you're getting for that cost, right? And oftentimes it can be hidden. There's a lot of different products out there. There's a lot of different ways that advisors or brokers or insurance salesmen can get paid. And so asking the questions, and I mean, there's a lot of rules that govern how they should disclose that information. Regardless, there's still a lot of ways where it's kind of brushed over and not super concrete. So just be upfront and ask. I don't think it's unreasonable to pay up to 1%. I don't think you probably need to pay over 1%. But as long as you're getting a significant amount of ongoing service and advice, and when you look at the true value of working with an investor, with a financial advisor, it's not necessarily that they're going to give you the best stock picks or mutual funds or whatever product you use. It's really the real value is added in putting your funds in the right place and keeping your funds in place when the market gets scary, or if the housing market tanks. You don't want to sell your house in the middle of 0809. If you don't have to, you'd be much better off holding it for a few more years and letting the value come back up or what somebody's willing to pay for it. Same with the stock market, right? You don't want to sell in March of 2020, yet a lot of people did. And a lot of people do sell when it feels scary, right? And so part of that, advisory fee is really attributed to behavior coaching and reminding them that the market has corrections, and corrections are normal and healthy parts of the market, but it's your job to stick with the plan despite the current situation. And so when you look at 0809, which, Nick and I were just finishing up school, and the market sold off very, very heavily, and it was about a 50% correction. For those who held on, in about 24 months, they were kind of back to where they were prior to that event. For the people who panicked in the middle of, March of 09, they locked in and realized that loss. And so that's where a good advisor come alongside and say, look, Apple is still a very good company. There's people are still buying iPhones. They're still buying Macs and iPads and whatever. Their stock will eventually represent their true value. Might be down today, but eventually their true value will be represented. So, and then when we look back at 2020, in April and in May, I was not thinking that the market was going to continue to go straight up. But we also didn't advise people to sell when the market was down in March, right? So we don't know how fast things are going to recover. And a lot of people say, I'm going to put my money on the sidelines and I'll get back in when things get better. None of us know when things are going to get better. And the market's often, if not always, the leading indicator, right? The market came back well before we even finished shutting the economy down. And so when we look at, anybody trying to time the market, it really is a fool's game. You've got to get it right twice. And if people could successfully do that, they'd be making a lot of money. And the reality is that you can't. So don't try and time the market. If you're not getting ongoing service and advice, then you don't need to be paying somebody for ongoing service and advice. But if they're doing their job properly, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 1% is probably a fair cost.
Spot on, Rob. I think, that fee, you're paying that fee for someone just to hold your investment somewhere. That's probably not the most appropriate place to be. But like Rob said, if you are looking for really more of a partner to work with you on many different goals that you have, then that's really where, the value comes in. Return on your investments is one thing. They're going to do about as good as anywhere else because that's what the stock market does over time. But when you have to make a decision to buy a house or figuring out when you need to retire or how to save for your kids' college or, how to, save money on taxes, right? All those things add up. That usually is a part of any fee you may pay an advisor. And yeah, the big thing is having that emotional coach, right? I mean, there's a lot of statistics out there that show, the return of an investment is much different than investor return, which is you and I. If you were to invest in the S&P 500 fund, you would have averaged about 11% over, 20 plus years. But the average investor, meaning people that own investments and make decisions, averaged about 2. Because when things happen and the emotions are at all-time highs, we decide to sell, and we have to decide to get back in. And usually it's a few years too late, where we miss out on a lot of potential return that will help our retirement. And the great thing about myself and Rob is that you have to call us to do anything. So we have the opportunity to talk you off the ledge and be that voice of reason. But I think that's really a big piece, and people don't really look at that too much, because especially this last year with a lot of the frenzy that we're seeing in the stock market and people making all this money, you don't necessarily hear a lot about the people that maybe bought Bitcoin at 50,000 and now it's worth 30. Of course, it would have been great if you started when it was first established, but it all comes down to having that partnership and somebody that has your best interest at heart, and knowing what's the right thing for you, not what somebody on the news said you should do. And it's all part of that partnership. So I think any fee only matters if you're getting value. Of course, it's high if you're not getting any value. I mean, you can go on Robinhood.com and pay 0% and buy your own investments, but you're not going to have anyone to tell you, how you should invest and have the planning aspect by it. So.
Thank you so much. And we have so quickly reached our kind of cap point for our time. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Nick, for all of this amazing advice, and also for taking our questions from the audience. I know we've got a couple more, so we'll definitely submit those to them and share the answers in our wrap-up email. But I do want to share a couple ways that you all can keep in touch with us. We want to keep in touch with you as our Vanguard community. First and foremost, we do invite you all to pray with us for our new and returning students, faculty, and staff as we begin to prepare for this in-person fall semester. We do have information on our website if you want to stay in the know and updates for what's going on at Vanguard. We do have an awesome opportunity for volunteering, obviously with our Alumni Council, but we do have our new student mugging next week with our Alumni Council as well. And if you'd like to learn more, you can reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And please do save the date for Vanguard Giving Day on November 10th, 2021. It's coming so fast and we can't wait. We're already getting so many great funding opportunities from athletics, academics, student life, and beyond with our entire university. I do want to say one more time, thank you so much, Rob and Nick, and please do expect a copy of Rob's book, everyone. We are so excited to share it, and what an awesome furthered gift for furthered learning. If anyone has any questions for our panelists, feel free to reach out. But Nick and Rob, thank you so much. This has been one of my favorite Learn and Leads thus far, and truly you guys are just such masters and gurus, and thank you for sharing with us.
My pleasure. And
Pleasure. Yeah.
You guys are welcome to reach out with any direct questions, personal questions. I'd be happy to give you some answers or some guidance. So Tivoli or Heather can provide you with our contact information, but we'd be happy to jump in and answer maybe some more specific questions.
Yep, definitely. Same here. Always available for any questions, and look forward to hopefully connecting with some of you guys at any future Vanguard events.
Absolutely.
Yes, please, everyone stay tuned. We're going to have events in person, and we can't wait to see everybody. It'll be such a gift. We can't wait. But thank you both so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We do have our next Learn and Lead in September. We will be having a wonderful Meet Our DEI team with our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Vanguard team and all of the awesome and amazing things that they're doing. Every day we're learning just so much more of how they are serving our students and our community. community so well. So definitely RSVP for those. We've got Learn and Leads every month. And if you have a topic that you want to hear, let us know because we can make it happen. We obviously have a great community of alumni who know so much, and we'd love to present to whatever topics you want to hear. Thank you again for joining us, everybody, and we hope to see you on campus soon. If you come by to visit, let us know because we'll take you to coffee at Dr. Ben's Coffee Bar.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Nick. Love seeing your Vanguard diploma and Rob's blue and gold. I mean,